Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about gardening, botanical history, and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is November 16th. Today in botanical history, we'll celebrate Laurel Hill and root crop preservation from 1835. We'll also remember the botanist who discovered the Titan arum and a little poem about the November Garden by Louise Driscoll. We'll hear an excerpt from Pomegranate Soup today, and we grow that garden library with a beautiful garden book from 2016. And then we'll wrap things up with a look back at a charming garden column from 1999. Well, this past weekend, when I came up to the cabin, I had a little shock. I was looking at my front garden. Of course, we had just finished putting that path in. And so I was just checking things out. And what do I see blooming? But my pincushion flower, my scabiosa. Can you believe that? That is a spring blooming ephemeral. And there it was, blooming its little heart out right before the snow fell. So I was going to go out there before I left on Monday, yesterday, and just dig it out under the snow and see how it's doing. But I didn't get a chance to do that. And so there it is. I'm sure it was weighed down by the snow, which is supposed to melt. And so we'll see if it survived and how it's faring when I go back up there this weekend. I'll take a picture of it. But just such a surprise. And, when I was looking at botanical history for today, I stumbled on this little poem that was written by Louise Driscoll. And it made me think about that little pincushion flower still blooming so late in the year. And yet every year, there's always something like that, some little surprise. I'm sure in your own garden, if you look, you might be surprised by something that's either rebloomed or just continues to bloom. My mom was telling me how good their shrubs have looked. And despite the snowfall, it's even, I think, a little more jarring to see the burning bush and the barberry and all the different shrubs. Even the spirea look fantastic down at my mom's place. So she said they just had tremendously beautiful fall foliage this year. So there you go. Just things that you don't expect, unexpected pleasures in the fall garden. All right, it's time for today's curated news. Well, today's curated news comes from Mara Flannery. This is from her WordPress blog called Herbarium World. And she wrote a piece recently called Circulating Specimens. And she shared in this particular piece her experience with using online resources to do her herbarium research. She starts it out by saying this: like many people during the COVID pandemic, I became more dependent on social media for links to the world. She writes, I didn't spend that much more time on Twitter, but I used it differently. It had been a way for me to find out about the latest articles and books on botany, as well as goings on in herbaria and botanic gardens. But then I began using it to find online opportunities. For example, the Consortium for the History of Science, Technology, and Medicine has been around for over 10 years, but I had never become involved. And a notice on Twitter sent me to the Consortium website, where I discovered and joined two of its groups. She joined Collections and Collecting, and then Visual Cultures in Natural History, the Life Sciences, and Medicine. And she says that each of these groups host seminars complete with a paper for a monthly meeting. And then she writes, I came away with both information and an intellectual high. And at this point in her blog post, she starts to talk about how she's using online herbarium resources to do her work. In the old days, you would have herbarium specimens sent to you if the library or the herbarium would allow that. But nowadays, there is so much work that can be done online. And so I do that as well. In addition to using sites like Twitter and other social media, including sites like Ancestry.com, there are just so many different places out there now where you can conduct your botanical research, whether it's finding out about new resources like Mara did in this post, pointing you in the right direction, or gaining access to new online botanical resources. So all of that work, cataloging and digitizing so many collections is really starting to pay off for people who spend a great deal of time online. Pretty fascinating. Well, if you would like to check out this post by Mara Flannery, and in general, I would say just nose around her blog because it really is fascinating, all you need to do is head on over to the Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community. I've shared Mara's post there. Her blog is called Herbarium World. Mara is a wonderful writer, and she shares a ton of inspiration and information over on her blog. Now, if you're not in the Facebook group for the show, just remember you can join that at any time, and it's so easy to do. All you need to do is head on up to the search bar. The next time you're in Facebook, just head on up there and type in the words Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for an old friend, and then request to join, and I'll admit you into the group. And then you'll start to see posts like this one by Mara in your newsfeed. It's very handy. All right, it's time for today's botanical history. Here's botanical history for today, November 16th. It was on this day, November 16th, in 1776, at around 7 a.m., that Hessian troops, allied with the British, opened fire on the American revolutionaries that were stationed on Laurel Hill. Laurel Hill is not named for the plant called laurel. Rather, Laurel Hill was originally part of the Joseph Sims estate, and Joseph went by Laurel. And so the property that became known as Laurel Hill was named that way to honor Joseph Sims, who was known as Laurel. Now, mountain laurel is botanically known as Kalmia latifolia in honor of the Finnish botanist Per Kalm. And after his expedition to North America in the mid-1700s, he correctly predicted that American colonists would eventually rebel. And so you have Laurel Hill on this day being impacted by that rebellion. And by the way, Laurel Hill became America's first National Historic Landmark cemetery. It's located in Philadelphia. And it was on this day, November 16th, in 1835, that the Hartford Courant wrote a piece called Gardener's Work for November. Here's what it said. It is now quite time to preserve the root vegetables, and Mr. McMahon's method of preserving roots is as follows. Prior to severe frost, you should take up with as little injury as possible the roots of your turnips, carrots, parsnips, beets, parsley, artichokes, celery, and horseradish, and on the surface of a dry spot on the ground in a well-sheltered situation, lay a stratum of sand about 2 inches thick. Then put the root crops on top, covering them with yet another layer of sand, the drier the better, and then continue to layer sand and roots, then cover the heap or ridge with a good coat of straw up and down as if you're thatching a house. And that is how you were to store your root vegetables back in 1835. And then today in 1843, the Italian botanist Odoardo Beccar was born. After growing up an orphan, he managed to get an education in his native Italy, and he eventually traveled to England and studied at Kew. He became friends with Hooker and Darwin, but he also befriended James Brooke, which meant that Beccar was able to spend 3 years with Brooke exploring Borneo. During his lifetime, Beccar traveled all over India, Malaysia, and New Zealand. But it was on a little voyage that he took to central Sumatra in 1878 that Beccar discovered the plant with which he will forever be associated, the Amorphophallus titanum, or the Titan arum, the largest flower in the world. 7 years later, in 1885, the first Titan arum in captivity bloomed at Kew, and when it happened, it created a sensation. Today, a Titan arum bloom still draws thousands of visitors and lots of media coverage, and there's no doubt about it, people love taking selfies in front of the giant blooming plant. But of course, there is a downside. The flower is commonly called the corpse flower because it smells like rotting flesh. In fact, in a recent fascinating article, scientists that study scent identified compounds that make up that terrible smell. And the odor includes aspects of cheese, sweat, rotting flesh, decomposing meat, and garlic, among even more awful, unmentionable compounds. Now, that putrid smell is meant to attract beetles and other insects to move pollen between blooming plants so that the plant can reproduce. And it takes the corpse flower a decade before it can bloom. So that's why we wait so long. Now, incredibly, the plants only bloom for 24 to 36 hours before they collapse. And so you have this very small window to go and see a Titan arum in bloom. Well, between that first bloom at Kew back in 1885 and the year 2000, fewer than 50 Titan arum blooms had been recorded. But in 2016, in that single year, dozens of corpse flowers around the world bloomed within weeks of each other. That was puzzling. In fact, horticulturists are still baffled by this, and they're attempting to discern the reason for that clustered bloom event back in 2016. All right, and it was also on this day, November 16th in 1920, that the Buffalo Times shared a poem by Louise Driscoll that had first appeared in the New York Times. And her poem is called The November Garden. And if you remember at the top of the show, I was talking about seeing that pincushion flower so bizarrely in bloom in my November garden. It's totally out of place. It should not be blooming until May. And here it was, proud as can be, blooming in my November garden. And so when I came across this poem by Louise Driscoll that was shared in the Buffalo Times today, on this day back in 1920, over 100 years ago, I thought about that little flower, that little bloom. So in any case, I'm going to share with you the first and then the last verse from Louise's poem called November Garden. In my November garden, I found a larkspur blossoming, a lovely, radiant blue thing. It swayed and shone, and did not seem to know it was alone in my November garden, where dry, dark leaves are falling, and all the birds have flown. The birds in summer went away that no man knows, but here is honey that no bee will find, no bird will linger at this larkspur cup. This grace the butterfly has left behind. Summer went away and gave it up. Yet it is bravely blue, swinging there alone, as if to challenge you. It's time for today's Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words come to us from Marcia Mayron. This is from her book called Pomegranate Soup, which is also called Fesenjoon. It is the pomegranate that gives Fesenjoon its healing capabilities, the original apple of sin, the fruit of a long-gone Eden. The pomegranate shields itself in a leathery crimson shell, which in Roman times was used as a form of protective hide. Once the pomegranate's bitter skin is peeled back, though, a juicy garnet flesh is revealed to the lucky eater, popping and bursting in the mouth like the final succumber of lovemaking. Long ago, when the earth remained still, content with the fecundity of perpetual spring, and Demeter was the mother of all that was natural and flowering, it was this tempting fruit that finally set the season spinning. Having eaten 6 pomegranate seeds in the underworld, Persephone, the goddess of spring's high-spirited daughter, had been forced to spend 6 months of the year in the eternal halls of death. Without her beautiful daughter by her side, a mournful Demeter retreated to the dark corners of the universe, allowing for the icy gates of winter to finally creak open. A round crimson herald of frost, the pomegranate comes to harvest in October and November. So Fesenjoon is best made with its concentrate during other times of the year. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Plant by Phaidon. This book came out in 2016. It's gorgeous. You might remember it. It's got a black background and then a simple blossom design. And each of the leaves is made with a different type of fabric. So it is a magnificent cover. And the subtitle to this book is Exploring the Botanical World. Now, of course, like all Phaidon books, this book is so visually appealing from the cover to the inside of the book. And of course, the whole point of this book is to show the beauty and the diversity of plants through 300 works of botanical art that go from ancient times all the way to modern times. And you'll see plants and flowers, the entire botanical world, portrayed using a variety of different mediums. Now, Phaidon did a great job of curating all of these images. In fact, this is the very first book to pull together botanical art that crosses so many different types of media and covers such a broad timeline from every corner of the globe. So, of course, in this book, you're going to see beautiful botanical art, but then you're also going to get lots of expert information about the pieces of art and the plants that are depicted. And of course, Phaidon is known for putting together these high-level, very specialized books. And in this case, what they did to tackle this topic of plants is they pulled together all kinds of experts, museum curators, horticulturists, historians, botanists, and more. And then they had each of them contribute their expertise in creating the text for this book. And I love what Gardens Illustrated wrote about it when they did their little review. They said, this is a dazzling collection of more than 300 images of plants that bring the evolution of botanical art right into the 21st century. Alongside old favorites like Rodin and Mary Delaney, there is much here that is both unfamiliar and arresting, an extraordinary collection. This book is 352 pages of botanical art that gives us a new appreciation and understanding of plants and their role in our history and culture. You can get a copy of Plant by Phyton and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $17. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, November 16th in 1999, that the Columbus Telegram shared a column that was written by Elizabeth Koblenz. She was an old order Amish woman who hand wrote her column by lantern light in her Indiana home. And here's what she wrote 22 years ago today. November is now on the calendar, and we are still having beautiful days in the 70s. The laundry is drying well out there on the clothesline, and work is continuing in our garden. I've been taking the celery, carrots, red beets, cabbage, and pumpkins out from the garden today. Hopefully, the weather will stay nice, and some vegetables will grow even larger. To the reader who sent me radish and turnip seeds to plant, I did plant them in August, and we are now feasting on them. They are very good and tender, which was surprising considering our hot, dry summer. I should have put more sweet potato plants in the ground, but at least we have enough for a good taste this winter. We'll be glad for all this hard work in the garden during the long, cold, dark days of January when we can open those canning jars and taste the bounty of summer. Sunday evening, we planned a favorite around here for supper, tacos. We had a large gathering, but having family over is the best of times. Those sweet, precious grandchildren are always welcome here, so the house was full of children. We all enjoy a taco supper. The tomatoes, mango peppers, and onions used on the tacos were all from our garden. Canned hamburger was browned for the tacos, and there was lots more to feast on because everyone else brought a covered dish. As the family gets bigger and older, we have to use larger containers. And then she writes, here is a good dessert to use those beets from the garden. And she shares a recipe for red beet chocolate cake. The ingredients include 1.5 cups of sugar, 3 eggs, a cup of oil, 1.5 cups of cooked pureed fresh beets, 2 1-ounce squares of unsweetened chocolate melted and cooled, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 1 3/4 cups flour, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and sifted confectioner's sugar. And so what you do is you mix up your dry ingredients, and then you combine the sugar, eggs, and oil, and then you beat in the beets with the chocolate and vanilla, and then gradually add in your dry ingredients. Put that all in a 9x13 pan, and then bake it in the oven for 25 minutes or until it tests done with a little toothpick. And then she writes, cover and let stand overnight to improve the flavor. You can sprinkle the top of the cake with powdered sugar. P.S. You can put cream cheese icing on instead of the powdered sugar, if that's what you want to do. Very sweet. So, cute little update on November from an old order Amish woman named Elizabeth Koblenz. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota. If you want to read today's show notes, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can always get in touch by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.